timeline. So can you afford to wait for 1.5 years for you to publish, or do you need something more quicker, more organized, quick in response, that kind of thing? And if that information is not available, I even ask students to reach out to the editor. Hey, what's your typical review time? If it's not on the website. So once you do all of that, then depending on your situation, some are very theoretical, some are very practical papers, some are, I don't care about the time, but it's all about quality. I mean, everybody have a different need. Then we pick the right journal, and then you talk to that author, the audience. Your language, your tone, your title, talk to the people that they're the primary readers of that journal. So sometimes it takes more time in the beginning, and then changing it later. So this way, then implication, introduction, everything kind of tones are changing. So that's the way we select. I select.
Thank you. Can I just emphasize one of your points, because when I desk reject manuscripts from my journal, that is for agroforestry systems, a Springer journal, one of the main reasons for desk rejection is the audience, the scope.
Mm-hmm.
Keep in mind, a journal is in business to cater to a particular audience.
Mm-hmm.
Especially thematic journals. So if you don't read the scope of the journal, if you don't write for the audience, it's very easy for me as an editor-in-chief then, just to look at it. Well, I have even a standard template letter that I just copy and paste it.
That's right.
That's it. It's very easy.
Yeah.
And a lot of the desk rejections are for that reason only.
Actually, it happens more than you think. It sounds so logical and basic, but it happens more than you think.
Exactly.
So I'm currently serving as vice president of the publication in my organization. So I oversee the journal called Clothing and Textile Research Journal. I just got the annual report. This journal received about 230 articles last year. 30% of them, 35% of them were desk rejected. Because it's fit. It's not outside of scope.
In my journal is close to 50%.
Oh my goodness.
50%.
That's even worse. Yeah, that's crazy. So people don't even read where you're sending to. It's almost like you need to go to Paris, but you have airplane tickets to go to, I don't know, London. It's like hello, right?
And these are smart people.
Yes.
It's like all of us. They still make the wrong decision to send to your journal. It's like that.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds so dumb, but it happens so often. I don't understand that.
I think one of the reasons why that happens is because people don't read the journal that they are submitting to.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I know this happens is because the journal I edit, Agriculture and Human Values, has a particular format in which articles look and abstracts and so forth. And I will see papers submitted in very different format, especially abstract. Some journals will have an abstract that's just a paragraph. Other journals will have abstracts that are broken out into the purpose and the methods and the findings and so forth. And when I get papers submitted to my journal and I see the abstract broken out in the various sections, that's not the way we abstract. That tells me right there, this person has not even seen any papers that we publish in the journal because they're not familiar with the format.
Yeah.
So you have to be familiar with the journal, which means you have to read the papers in the journal, and because otherwise you're wasting the editor's time, you're wasting your time, because it does take some time to submit. And the last thing you want is to click that submit button, the next day you get a rejection from the editor.
That's right.
Well, wasting my time.
So how many of you are graduate students?
Wow.
A good number of you are graduate students. That's great, because I don't remember as a graduate student going through a discussion like this ever. I still published. Well, I got my help from my advisor. So.
And especially with graduate student, I say you don't have to shoot the moon for your first shot.
Exactly. Work with your advisor.
Yeah. just take step at a time. You know, this year our goal is to maybe I also have a couple of theories of like 30, 40, 30 rules. Meaning, if you have 10 papers, let's say do that, about 30 or 40% in the shoot for Class A journal, right? If you the middle, the 40% shoot for maybe Class B journal, and if it's last 3, maybe the it is still academic analytic trackable, but it doesn't have to be the best in the whole world, because in your first 2 years, you may have to publish it here to learn, because you learn by doing it. And then maybe second year 2, you start submitting to Class B journal, the better journal, but it's not the best in the whole world. But if you want to shoot for the Class A journal, as soon as I just finished the dissertation, I'm the best in the world, I know what I'm doing, I'm going to shoot for Class A journal, and then you get rejection. And then you submit to another journal, and then get rejection again. It kills your confidence. You don't spend that time to learn. It's like, let's take a step at a time. You don't have to shoot them as soon as you just finished one degree. So have that plan, your longer term plan, so that you can have the aspirational journal to go after Nature one day. That's, I can't, but, but we all start from somewhere. That's what the good things about so many different options of journals.
Thank you. Does anybody in the audience have a question? Yes.
Dr. James, you mentioned publishing analytics. You're probably referring to PlumX, I guess. And
Say it one more time.
you refer to the publishing analytics, probably like PlumX. Is that what you're referring to? Like
Academic analytics.
How much is that factoring into how you select a journal? Like how much the journals promote that?
Well, for me, if it's not in academic analytics, I'm not going to submit. But academic analytics has a big list. So it's going to have all the top journals, and it's going to have a lot of second tier and even some third tier journals.
DOI, as soon as you have a DOI.
Yeah. But there are journals out there, some predator, but even some non-predator, some recognized legitimate journals that are not listed in academic analytics. So I just go there. I pulled out all the journals in my discipline and related disciplines, and so I take me 30 seconds to find the journal. If it's in there, then at least I know I reached that particular goal.
I might interject something in there. PlumX is more tracking social mentions of articles and academic analytics. That's part of their name, but they're not doing that kind of stuff. They're more tracking research by faculty at different universities. The university subscribes to academic analytics to sort of keep track of everything their faculty are doing and make sure they're sort of, progressing as they go along and things like that. So they're two different.
I think it's a cross.
I think that's what I was trying to.
I don't even know.
Academic analytics uses journals that are in cross-reference, which is quite a few. It's a pretty huge number.
But is academic analytics even available for grad students?
No.
Only for faculty or administrators, I believe.
If
At the moment,
grad
it's just
students will not be
faculty, but I think
counted.
they're picking one system to expand to graduate students. And is
Okay,
that
grad
students?
Your advisor may have access, but I don't think it is available.
That's a
for
grad,
students.
Yeah. Not a component.
We do have Web of Science and other tools that already will give you impact factors for journals, and the journals will promote those impact factors as well.
Do you actively promote on social media? Like do you post your articles?
I have everything listed in LinkedIn, and then I have a blog, and so I'll do a blurb on my blog, and I'll link that to Facebook. So, and then it automatically goes to Twitter as well. So, yeah, I mean, you have to play the social media game.
Yeah.
Dr. Jones, would you like to talk about how you promote your articles?
You could. I've never done that personally, but I have set up a Google Scholar account as well as a ResearchGate account. So my articles will show up there. And I personally have not uploaded any articles in ResearchGate, but I see that a lot of people do that all the time. And there may be a little bit of heartburn between ResearchGate and the actual publishers.
Just to speak on behalf of Springer Nature,
Yeah.
we are piloting having official preprint editions or preprint editions in
That'd be good.
ResearchGate
Oh,
for
okay.
certain
Alright.
journals,
Okay.
a lot of nature journals, 2017 and later. You can't get in the way of, you can't stop ResearchGate, so we're trying
Yeah.
to join them a little bit.
So that's the advice that I would give to grad students, please go ahead and start. As soon as you get your first publication, establish yourself in Google Scholar as well as ResearchGate. A lot of people all over the world follow those two as kind of the social media of the academic world.
Yes.
So you cannot ignore them. I'm glad to hear that you are
Yeah.
also moving in that direction. Yeah.
Because of the copyright, I can't upload most of the articles.
It's an issue.
I
It's
know.
a huge issue.
Yeah.
But
What
then
is
you get the
legitimate
requests
on
all the
ResearchGate? What could be considered copyright?
So it was really interesting. I was in China this past summer. Researchers reach out to me. Oh yeah, that's on the Google Scholar. You can go look at it. I'm like, if we can't access the Google Scholar, right? So then they all went through the ResearchGate. Can you put that in ResearchGate? Wait a minute, I can't put it on the ResearchGate because of the copyright issues, right? So it is. That's what I like about publishing in open access, even though it costs me money, because it really democratized knowledge in the whole world, right? So I love it, and I post it in ResearchGate, but then most of the journals you can't. So it's really
You can store as a private in ResearchGate, as a non-public publication.
Yeah.
And I frequently get requests via ResearchGate for a copy of the article. And so you can send
privately.
Yeah, it's not publicly, but you can send privately. But I'm glad you mentioned Google Scholar and ResearchGate. This is one of the frustrations of the academic world is that there's ResearchGate, there's Google Scholar, there's ORCID, there's Academy, there's Mendeley, there are a half a dozen of these sites that where you kind of promote your work. And you kind of have to keep up on all of them because there's not one universal one. Some are automatic. Google Scholar sort of does things automatically for you. It's the world we live in where you got to keep up on some of the social media aspects.
The Google Scholar, I found it to be very efficient because
It does it for
I learn about publications of my own articles through Google Scholar these days.
Yes, me too.
Before even the publisher tells you your article is published, I don't know how they do that. But it's in my Google Scholar.
But then I realized the China can't access it, right? So that's when I realized, I do have to be more active in ResearchGate because of the thing. So that's why it's additional work.
Google Scholar is very prolific, looking at how academic universities use or access content. I think Google Scholar is a top 3 website at every single university I've been to in this country. It's one of the top ones.
And it's factoring in promotion and tenure decisions. So I chair the CAFR promotion and tenure committee, and so I see dossiers and. One of the things that you have to do in order to document your productivity is the impact.
Yeah.
And Google Scholars will tell you very quickly number of citations and various indices that will allow you to show that your work is at least being cited and so forth. So Google Scholar is very good. Google Scholar, ORCID, and ResearchGate are probably the 3 to focus on. If you don't have accounts there, get them set up.
Everyone should have an ORCID account if they're even considering authoring a paper. That's considered a must today. So switching gears a little bit, talking about collaboration. What are your experiences collaborating with authors from different institutions?
Well, it depends.
Positive.
I've had good experiences, I've had less than good experiences. I mean, the email makes collaborating extremely easy, and so you know it can be done. But I mean, I find I have the same kind of experience, or good experiences and bad experiences collaborating with colleagues in different universities that I have, or collaborating with people here. Just depends on how they work and whether they respond and so forth. But I don't really see, at least for me, I don't see much of a difference, you know, in terms of collaborating. I've been working with two scholars from China, and they're quick. We get things done fairly quickly. So you know, email, and if you're collaborating with anybody, don't be the weak link. You know, you respond quickly, you get the work done, you decide what, you know, how you dividing up responsibilities, you get your thing done, because you know, you don't want to be the weak link in the collaborating dilemma.
I'll add to that. One of my couple years ago, I did all of that. It was ready to be submitted, right? So then as a co-author, you also have to, like, whatever is this paper done, you know, ethically, and what do you call it? It was some sort of a contract, sort of a copyright issues and things like that. When I get to that, I said, hey, so-and-so, did you get your IRB approval? Right? And, oh no, in my country, I don't need it. And I said, oh no, I can't publish in my country without IRB, right? So, oh, we never have to do that in my university. I have to do that in my university. So I said, I don't want to waste my time because she's a junior faculty and I don't really need that. So I said, if you want to publish it, you publish it. Don't put my name on it, my university on it, because we didn't follow whatever research, whatever conduct thing, right? So I said it, and this person actually reached out to the journal editor, right? And this is, I don't know what journal it was, I don't remember, but I think it's a global journal, like one of the Emeralds or something like that. I said, my university, my country doesn't expect us to have an IRB. Can I submit it? And that journal editor couldn't answer. So we'll find out and get back to you, and then we never got it, right? So I don't know what the answer is, but I know what I need to do, which I need to go through the human subject IRB. And I said, I didn't feel comfortable, even though I wasted time. And I said, please don't put my name on it. So she ended up not actually publishing. She ended up having to collect the data again, even though her university didn't require, because her collaborator requires, she had to recollect the data, reanalyze it after IRB through our university, because their university doesn't have an IRB system. So that was the one thing that it was really interesting that I didn't even think about from the get-go. So, so if you were to collaborate with internationally, have you thought about it? You know, we still have to follow our guidelines. So these are the things that you may have to think about.
Well, when it comes to collaborations, first of all, you should ask the question, you know, why are you collaborating, right? It's easier sometimes for you and your advisor and perhaps, you know, one of your committee members from the same institution to work on a single paper. And most often it happens like that, because when you are doing your master's or PhD, most of the folks associated with that project could be from the same institution. But in academia, we are promoting more and more multi-institutional, multi-state projects. So one of my titles is to serve as the Ag Experiment Station Director. So, well, every land-grant university has got an Ag Experiment Station. There is a special pot of money with USDA particularly with the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, to promote multi-state projects. So that if you write a multi-state project, then you get funding. So what does that mean? Then you have maybe 5 different states involved. In a project like that, no, you cannot just simply write a publication if it resulted from that multi-state project. So multi-institutional, multi-state collaboration. Is that going to be easy? Is that going to be easy like, you and your advisor and a committee member working on a paper together? No, it's going to be a nightmare. Let's face it, it's going to be difficult. And then think about international collaboration.
Right.
When you have people from institutions from other countries,
Right.
all sorts of ethical questions can come up at that point. So make sure that you choose your collaborators from international institutions wisely, so you won't have to regret in the end. All the, the formal paperwork procedure, make sure you follow everything so that it's not after the fact that you figure out, oh, probably I cannot publish this. So they didn't follow what we were supposed to follow. Now I cannot publish it. So make sure that you go through all of those pre-publication, even before you decide to collaborate. Perhaps you need to worry about issues of those nature or such nature, so that you have a publication in the end. So it's not going to be easy when you have collaborators, even from the same institution or multi-state or multi-countries. It's going to be difficult. But academia is demanding more and more multi-state, multinational, collaborative publications and projects. So that's going to be the nature. In many of your cases, you will be publishing, if not as a graduate student, when you get into a faculty position or a scientist position somewhere, you will be collaborating. That's going to be difficult. But somehow you have to make it work. And I have published with a number of international colleagues and also colleagues from other institutions in the US. Sometimes it's scientific collaborations that you are really doing a project and then publishing the results from that project. Sometimes these are review papers. Or sometimes these are edited volumes where you collaborate with a number of people. But it doesn't matter what is the nature of that collaboration. Anytime when you have to work with other people, it's going to be difficult. So that is something that you will be trained to do as part of your graduate program. And we often do that as faculty members all the time, and the faculty here, you can also chime in, but I know we often do that, forced to do that sometimes. It's rewarded in our system right now. So when you have that, something like that, for example, for the tenure and promotion process, you have to identify what is your contribution. Let's say a paper in Nature may have 100 authors. What is your contribution? You still have to justify. A paper in Nature doesn't just simply give you tenure and promotion. You still have to justify what is your unique contribution to that particular work. So you still have to say, okay, I contributed this in this paper. You still have to identify. The recent guidelines call for very detailed, your role. You have to describe your role in any such collaborative publications.
I want to add one more thing. So one of the cases that actually I myself was in this situation, they said, oh, we're writing a grant from, in this case, it was to Hong Kong government, like their version of NSF. And they cannot put foreigner as a co-PI. They cannot put foreigners' expenses, like only like, anyway, I don't remember. They cannot put like, I can't put my salary position or whatever. It needs to be all spent for Hong Kong residents. You see what I'm saying? So, which I didn't know. So, yes, submit the grant and all of that. And by the time the final budget comes in, I'm like, what? You can't put me as a co-PI, first of all. What? You can't even put my 50% of the grant, right? No. So, and then they had to like research or whatever. They finally find out, oh, I can I can only come to Hong Kong. Like I can put, the PI can put my travel expenses to come to Hong Kong to work with Hong Kong PIs, okay? Or go to a conference up to like $2,500 or something like that. There's a very small amount of money there, which I didn't know, right? So what I'm saying is that that could be very true here too. Like if you were to collaborate with somebody with Hong Konger, for example, and you want to put it to your federal grant, for whatever reason, you may or may not be able to put it depending on your grantor's restrictions, right? So we should know all this type of business matter, not only the policies and ethical part of it, but also business matters, especially if it's a grant. How much will I use even my lab? Then how do I expense that for that collaboration that I said okay with, right? So we have to actually think about all of that before actually we say yes, which I had to learn. But in my case, the deal was, so then can I at least be a co-author even though my name is not on your grant? So to me, publishing is more important than, I had $20,000 grant from Hong Kong government. You see what I'm saying? So so I was okay to be a co-author, and that's okay with me. But if your discipline is very grant heavy, grant is very important, and then you cannot put your name as an official co-PI in that grant for that country, then think twice about it. If they can put me as an official co-PI, I should have gone through the OSPA, right? It's an international contract, right? As a subcontractor to Hong Kong government's grant. I should have done that, but because of my nationality, I couldn't. So these are the things that you have to think about, especially faculty, especially if you use our university's facility. So in the meantime, because I can't put that in there, now I have to submit my conflict of interest and conflict of commitment report to our university and say, I did work with them on this grant project, but because of my nationality, I couldn't be on the, so it's not trackable by OSPA, right? It's still on my vita, but OSPA's perspective or our university's perspective, I didn't do any grant work, right? So, because it's not trackable from our Office of Sponsored Program office, right? So these are the things that, if your grant dollars are important, especially, I had to also justify that whatever I did, I didn't use any special equipment. I used my computer, that's all I did. But if you use our lab for that research, then it's a conflict of a sort of interest or commitment. So there's a lot more complicated things behind it than just because we have to find the cool people that I want to do it. So these are the things that you have to work with, talk with your grant writers, OSPA people before you commit to that, I think.
Your comment makes me think of another piece of advice. Don't assume anything.
Yeah.
Seriously, don't assume that that you're going to be the first author on the paper.
Sure.
Don't assume that your colleagues have taken care of the IRB or whatever the case is. Ask the questions up front. Okay, so we got you're collaborating with two other people. Who's going to be first author? Mm-hmm. Who's going to take responsibility for X? Who's going to take responsibility for Y? Mm-hmm. Ask the questions. If you are assuming that things are going to get done, or assuming that certain things are going to play out in the way that they're going to play out, you're going to run into problems down the line. There's nothing wrong with just asking the question. Mm-hmm. But I would ask first rather than assume.
How many of you are here from life sciences? Agriculture, life sciences, just a few. Well, especially when it comes to international collaborations, make sure that you will be able to bring your samples to the United States, or take samples from here somewhere else. Wow. That can always be a problem. Right. Students often run into that. They come up with all these great grand ideas, and then when it is time to execute, that's when they realize, oh, you don't have permit to bring samples from could be soil samples, it could be animal samples, plant samples, but we don't have the permission. And that could take a couple of years before you get all the permissions. And you only have maybe 2 years to do a master's project.
Yeah.
So don't get into that. I know this is all about publication, but
yeah.
even before you get into doing your research, you can run into major obstacles like that. And I've had experience like that in the past. And even a colleague of mine from the US on a Fulbright, he's a senior faculty member, went to a country, and the Fulbright was for, usually you get for 6 months or 9 months. He went from office to office seeking permission to collect samples and came back empty-handed after 9 months.
Bureaucracy or
Wow.
Exactly. So you need to do your homework well in advance. Otherwise, you'll be just wasting your time.
But you're going to make, just here's the other part of it, you will make mistakes.
Yes, yes.
And it's okay, you learn. You
Right.
learn. Right? You learned about the IRB,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So all of you will learn by experience.
Yeah.
Don't beat yourself up because you made a mistake.
Try to learn from somebody else's mistake and experience.
That's
That
what
may
we're
save you some
here.
time. Yeah, that may save you some time. But you'll also make mistakes and learn from your own
Yeah.
mistakes and experience too. You all have.
There's a
in the back. Yes.
May I ask a specific question? So I'm a first year master student from civil engineering. So recently, actually, we do have like cooperation with Hong Kong University. So the professor from Hong Kong bring his materials to me too, and then I'm doing the test, like use our Mizu facility, and then we are going to publish paper. Definitely, he is the co-author. So is that like a situation you talk about?
What kind of material are we talking about? If it is not live, like seeds or plants or
It's just
blood
product.
samples or anything like that, then you are okay.
Oh, just
And also.
So yeah, if it is not, that's why I asked you earlier, life science or
sciences.
agriculture, yeah.
And also, as,
Engineering, it should not be a problem. Yeah, but check with your advisor too.
thank you.
as long as you become a co-author, you're part of the ownership, so it's okay. I mean, it's not a grant work, right? So that we have to justify our commitment or anything. It's just, so that's okay.
We have a question from one of the online attendees who asks, what is your advice on the use of copyrighted materials, images, for example, in the submission of articles? Do you require that the author be able to secure the permissions or licenses for that?
Yeah, well, it's a requirement by the publisher. They wouldn't publish something if there is no copyright release from the original publisher of that article. So it's not even, of course, as a courtesy, we often try to get, and I think you should try to get permission from the author, but then just the author permission alone won't give you the right to put that same material in a publication. You need to have the copyright release from the original publisher of that particular figure or material before you can put it into another journal or another publisher's publication.
There's two elements to this. One is citing other work. You always cite other work, but you don't have to get permission to cite somebody else. I think the question we're talking about here is if you have, for instance, a figure
Yes.
or a
Pictures.
picture or something that was published in another paper, another outlet, that you want to reproduce that thing in your particular research. You cite that, but then you also have to get copyright agreement. And that's usually not with the author of the paper, unless it's open access or whatever.
Right.
But it's with the publisher. So most major publishing houses will have a relatively easy mechanism of obtaining copyright clearance. You go to the website where that paper is, there's probably going to be some link over there, somewhere on the page where it says, copyright agreement or permissions or something like that, reproduction permissions, and there'll be a mechanism for you to do that.
There is one way to actually do this. If you substantially modify an original work, then you can call it adapted from and cite that work and then make it your original, and then you can put that in.
There's a company called Copyright Clearance Center, which deals with a lot of these matters. And then for Springer Nature specific, there is a rights and permissions desk for these matters.
Sometimes it could take time to get that permission, depending on who the copyright owner is. In one of the cases that I had it was some museum government organization in Korea. Like, it took forever. So my co-author just walked into the museum and took a picture of it herself with the permission of them. So they say, if you want to use exactly the same picture that was published in our museum book, you need all these things have to happen. But you can come here and take a picture of yourself. We will give you a permission of taking a picture. So the photographer is my co-author, but the work was from the museum. You see what I'm saying? So you could do that. But if that would be an easier way than in this particular case going through all that clearinghouse, it depending on who the author is, who the copyright owner is, I think.
And keep in mind, in some cases, it will cost you dearly.
Yeah.
It's not going to be free. They will charge you. Some publishers, I don't know what Springer does now, I cannot remember, but
I don't specifically work in that department.
Yeah.
I do know that they do sometimes charge people, but I don't know.
yeah, some publishers will charge you dearly
Depends on
for
the use.
reproducing their figures.
Oh, but Wall Street was charging me $3,000 for a figure, so I said, no, I'm not including it.
Yeah, I'm not too sure what the criteria as far as Springer Nature is.
Yes, but this question, it's a good question, and actually raises a sort of a different point, is that if you are collaborating, you're responsible for 100% of what's produced. Which means you are responsible for any cases of plagiarism and copyright issues and the quality of the data and all this stuff. So if you are collaborating, you make sure that things are appropriate. And so the cases where I collaborated with international colleagues, I always run the paper, even the parts that I write, I always run it through Authenticate, just to make sure that there's no plagiarism issues and so forth. You are 100% responsible, even if there are 50 authors.
Yes.
Each author is 100% responsible for what is produced.
That's right.
And most journals these days, they will run it through Authenticate and report back to you. Yeah. Before even they decide whether it should be set out for review or not.
Sir, did you have a question right there?
Just in terms of citing that you mentioned, in terms of citing material, meaning material that you reference but not necessarily use. So you're referring to an article that you read, something that supports what you're doing. Is citing okay, or would you have to get released information to get to that?
No, you can cite. You need to cite. Yeah. If it's someone else's thought, you should cite. You should give them credit.
I think so I have a couple of my advisees who are so new to the concept of citing. So typically coming from international education background, it's like, how do you know this statement? You just say A affects B right here. How do you know that? I'm like, I've been studying all this discipline last 12 years and that's the known fact. I'm like, according to who, So don't assume that it's a known fact. It's this group of people said A affects B, or this A person said A affects B, or this A paper said A affects B. So you need to change the way you write. It's almost like a mentally switching your. So when you write things, am I saying it's because it's my opinion, or am I reporting what I read? So if you have that mindset, then when you write the lit review, you tend to kind of report what you read. Then your language becomes a little easier. I'll go according to so-and-so. Then that's okay, right? So it's sometimes some people can kind of get paranoid. Oh, I can't, plagiarize. I got to say aside everything. Then I kind of forget what I'm saying. So it's like, just every time you write, just say, who said this according to, so if I'm reporting what other people found, then your tone and everything's going to make it sound like you're citing somebody, then you're saying it yourself, That could be a helpful tool.
And when you cite someone, also keep in mind, don't just copy the, whatever it is. Rewrite that in your own words. Otherwise, Authenticate or some other plagiarism software will, even with a citation, will identify that as just copy and paste.
Well, I'm very new to publishing. I'm in the veterinary medicine field, and one of my biggest questions, I went to the librarian at the vet school, and one of my biggest concerns was
he did.
because one of the things I wanted to take precautions of is when you're publishing something of this nature. In veterinary medicine, you see a case and you think, oh, this has never been seen before, and you want to put it out there. So my question to you guys is, when going about publishing, how do you know and what resources do you guys utilize to know that somebody has not done this before? Because when you're going to have to, if somebody has done it before or seen this case before, you're going to have to reference it, and it may not be accepted because it's already been published. So what kind of resources do you guys use to monitor or gauge which direction you want to go with your paper?
Well, I can try to.
That's a good question.
I'll try first. Yeah. So first of all, don't assume that we know everything.
Right.
I'm editor-in-chief of a journal, and people sometimes assume that I know everything that's happening in that particular discipline, which is a very small field. But still, no, I don't. And so when I get a paper, if I think that it's original, it's just me thinking that it's original. It doesn't have to be original. But then that's when you have perhaps an associate editor that I will assign, depending on the, the type of this article, I will assign to an associate editor. That associate editor may also, if thinks, like me, that, oh yeah, that's original, then that associate editor is going to choose maybe 3 to 4 experts from that discipline as reviewers. So it's not just me sitting there and assuming that it's great, let me publish it. So by the time, if it is sent out for review, that means at least 2 people, the editor-in-chief and the associate editor, thought that was original enough. And then when we send it out for reviews, and we often look for who has worked in that particular area before we choose the reviewers. So they may know more about your particular article than the editor-in-chief or the associate editor. Even within a small discipline like what I represent is agroforestry, it varies from the social science all the way to hardcore molecular stuff. And I cannot possibly know everything that's happening in that broad spectrum of sub-disciplines within that small discipline. So, but that's where these reviewers come in. They may simply say that, well, this is what so-and-so did just last year. So what is new in here? And the associate editor may decide that there's nothing novel in what you just observed, so we are not interested in it. Or they may come back and ask you to justify, so-and-so did this, so how is this different? And it's up to you to show that it is different, and then you may get it published.
One of the questions that I ask reviewers to give me information on when I send a paper to them, I want to know, is the paper interesting? Is the paper novel, new? Is it important? Those are 3 very different things. You may have a really new idea, but who cares?
Right.
Right? That question, who cares, is actually very important. One of the most common questions that I ask when I am serving on a doctoral or master's committee is, so what? And it's a question you should ask yourself. So what? So you've got this model, you've done this survey, this project, so what? You have to motivate. So you have to be thinking about, is it important? Who's going to care about what you're doing? Novelty is important, but novelty may not necessarily be the most important thing. You could be talking about something that everybody else has been talking about, but you provide a new, I guess it depends on what we mean by novel.
Right.
But you have to be able to show that new knowledge was created, and you have to be able to make a case that you motivate that this new knowledge is important in some particular way.
So I have a follow-up comment on that. People come and say, so is this research question big enough for a dissertation? Right? The student's like, is this model complicated enough to be a dissertation? It's like, it's not about model, it's not about method, it's about so what. Like, is this so what is so good? The simplest the model actually, it's Occam's razor, right? The simpler you can explain the really important thing, that will be better off. So it's not, don't be driven by technique, what looks sexy and fancy, driven by the problems you're solving. And then obviously, if they already know how to solve this, solve this cancer, you should look for a different type of cancers, right? Because if everybody knows how to fix it already. But then that's how you are going to say, why this research matter. And then that sometimes tops the, your method may not be the most novel method, right? But this problem can be the most, important. And having said that also, when we read the literature review, like I did all the literature review, this is the only thing I found, nobody ever done it, right? Don't ever say that, because it might have somebody speaking German or writing in German, might have done that research. We just didn't read it in German, language or whatever language, or Chinese language, because it's not on the Google Scholar, right? So that doesn't mean that this is the first time you're ever doing it, okay? May not be. So sometimes that kind of language gives the reviewer, wait a minute, seriously, I'm gonna go look for it, right? So you could say there's very little understanding or lack of understanding, or not many people are doing it, or at least in English literature it's not being found, so that we're doing it, so things like that, just a little bit. So no matter what you do, sometimes 1,000 years ago, Mayans maybe, philosophized it, all right? But they never wrote about it, so we don't know. So we should, some of the humbleness, I think, like we don't know everything, needs to be should be reflected in our writing as well. So that don't feel like I have to have really, really novel and unique in one of the first kind ever. I have to do it for my dissertation. It's just sometimes small step will get to the breakthrough.
Yeah, this is a publication strategy discussion, and so the thought that I have as a follow-up, use the simplest model that you can, but the analogy for writing is don't sound too complicated.
Yeah.
Don't sound like put big words or complicated writing structure or whatever. Write as simple as you can. Avoid the scholar speak. I've been editing in journal for almost 13 years. I have rejected papers because I have no idea what they're talking about. I'm serious. Now, I don't know everything, but I can read.
Right.
And there have been times I have looked at the paper and I met with the author and I said, I'm sorry, I do not know what you are talking about. Now there were some times in which papers have been pretty good, but and I'm sort of inclined to want to publish it. I tell them, I use the word, don't use scholar speak. Scholar speak. Simplify the writing. Get rid of the big complicated words. Short sentences are really good. Use variety sentence structures, but short sentences are fine.
Yes.
Please do not use words you do not know. I got dinged on this when I was a graduate student. I used a word that sounded really good. It actually was the opposite of what I thought it was. And a reviewer caught me on that. So don't again, write to your style, but don't try to come across as smart.
Right.
All right? You're gonna, just write, because what do you want to do? We write, we publish to get our ideas out,
right? To
convince people that you have something new to offer. And if people can't understand what you're saying,
right,
you have deflated exactly what you were trying to do.
Right.
While you were giving that answer, I was looking for the H index for my postdoc advisor.
Postdoc advisor, okay.
His name is Peter Reich. He is a professor Regents professor at the University of Minnesota.
Okay.
This guy had his first degree in physics and creative writing, and then came to University of Missouri. From our college, College of Agriculture, Food and Natural Resources, he got a master's in ecology, and the rest is history. This guy is a National Academy member, perhaps the second most cited ecologist in the world,
Okay.
with an H-index of 148 and nearly 100,000 citations. And so, well, there was a story about him. He was traveling in Poland with his one of his visiting scholars from Poland. By the end of the day, he had stopped at 4 different places, and every place he would measure, like leaf length, leaf width, and this and that. And so, at the end of the day, he had a publication written up. I know it's an exaggeration, but this guy publishes, when I say this guy, he and his group, they have 30, 35, 40 publications every year.
Wow.
And he himself, as the first author, if you can look at his record, there would be at least 3 or 4 every year. Even now, he himself will have these publications. And the success in his writing is the simplicity.
Yeah.
I think he got that because of his creative writing undergraduate degree. He can write things in a very simple way. There's nothing complicated about his writing. He writes almost like telling a story to a 5-year-old. Right. Although he writes about complex things, but still in a very powerful, very simple way. I also had this kind of that idea that when you write scientific writing, it should be like somewhat polished and like in a different way, right? We often think about a different high standard for scientific writing. When I started working with Peter, that's when I realized that no, you don't have to. And this guy still publishes maybe 5-6 papers in Science Nature every year. But you read his papers and you will know. Peter Reich, R-E-I-C-H. It's very simple, because keep in mind that you're trying to communicate to your peers. It's not a competition on your ability to write English. It's actually a competition on how to communicate, if you will.
Right.
If you can communicate your message in a very simple way to your peers, then you succeed.
That's right. Okay, great. Short sentences.
We're about to run out of time, but
Okay.
before then, are there any other quick questions from the audience? Anything else online?
Has it been helpful? I hope it was helpful.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.
Thanks for our panelists.
Thank you.